with the CAP Technical Assistance Project, and we have Neil Kelly with the CAP office who will be presenting on NOVA program area reporting changes for 1819 reporting. This morning you all were sent an email with the PowerPoint attached. If for some reason you did not receive that email and you need another copy of it, then the PowerPoint is available for download under the resources pod. So you will select the file and select download, and then the file will download to whatever program your file downloads to. So you have that available to you for this webinar. So you can use it as a guide to take down questions that you may have, take down notes, or however you see it fit. I do notice that we do have people who are logging in, and they're logging in with either their initials or the name of their consortium. Please be sure to let us know exactly who you are. And also, if you're logging in and you are participating in today's webinar with multiple people, please be sure to let us know who everyone is in the room so that we can account for everyone in our attendance roster. That would be very helpful to us. Throughout the webinar, we will be taking questions. So if you have any questions, please be sure to post them into the chat pod. Throughout the webinar, Neil or myself will be stopping intermittently to answer questions. So if we do not get to you as soon as you post your question, please just be patient and we'll get to you as soon as time permits. And then we may have time at the end for any general questions that you may have regarding NOVA. So please be sure to let us know if you have any questions. If you experience technical difficulties throughout any time throughout this webinar, please be sure to let us know in the chat pod. We will be able to assist you via a private chat, and how that would look is you will see my name or Marjorie Alavides. You will see our name highlighted in a yellow tab. That's our way of communicating with you. So if you see that yellow tab at the bottom of the chat pod, that's our way of trying to get your attention to resolve whatever technical issue you were experiencing at that time. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the California Adult Education website later on this afternoon. So if you have to leave for any reason, or you'd like to revisit today's webinar materials or pass this information on to other colleagues, you'll be able to do so by using the URL that I will post in the chat pod. So that's all that I have for you at this moment. I will turn it over to Neil, who will get us started with today's webinar. Neil?
Thanks, Veronica. Welcome, everyone. Boy, we have a big crowd today. I guess school's back in session, because we did a webinar a couple of weeks ago and we didn't have quite the crowd. It was still a good-sized crowd, but not like today. And today, I mean, the reporting changes should be pretty simple, but we'll go through it and see if we have any questions. If you haven't been on these webinars before, the way it works is if you do have questions, you can use the chat, and then from time to time we'll go back to the chat and try to answer those questions, or somebody can type and share information while one of us is talking. We will get a chance to, later on in the presentation today, Veronica will share her screen and take you through NOVA. So if you're a NOVA novice, she can show you how to navigate to this reporting area in NOVA. And I think we'll have some time at the end so you can ask general NOVA questions. And maybe even Veronica can answer maybe some issues that you might be having. So with that, let's see, no other questions. And let's look at the agenda today. So I'm going to review the requirements. Hopefully everyone received the program area, I think it was labeled NOVA Program Area Reporting Hours and Expenses for 1819. That came out last week. So we're going to go over that letter. Then we'll review the changes. If you participated in this exercise in February for 1718, we'll review the changes from that process of what we're going to do for 1819. And then Veronica is going to open up the NOVA hood and take us through that. And then we have some FAQs at the back end of this. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always follow up with TAP. So with that, let's see. I'm not seeing any questions. So here are the reporting requirements. It should be CAPE members, not AEP. So all CAPE members, so that would include your K-12 districts, your county offices, if you're a JPA, and any community college districts. They must submit in NOVA the total hours of instruction for program year 1819. So that would be July 1, 2018 to June 30th, 2019, provided to students in the 7 program areas. And this would be adult education non-credit if you're at the college. If you're at the K-12 or county office, it's just adult education. Then the second part of this reporting requirement is same group must submit in NOVA the total operational costs for program year 1819, same term or span, by fund source, and we'll get into those fund sources in the 7 program areas, non-credit or adult education. So that's basically the reporting requirements. If you're not familiar with NOVA, this is how the program area hours screen looks like. And so if you look on the left-hand side, and Veronica is going to take us here today, but once you got into your consortia side here, we have Antelope Valley, Union High at the top, and we click on program area reporting, and that takes us to this screen. If you want to look at the second, so this is for hours. The next screen is for the expenses, and it says leverage funds. And that shows across the top the program areas, and on the side is the fund sources. We'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit. And so here's one of the changes, the reporting. Last year we reported everything in February. This year we're going to settle in on a process that allows you a little more flexibility in time. So September 1st, estimates are due, so hours of instruction estimated, and expenses by program area by fund source estimated. And the reason we do an estimate on September 1st is the California Department of Education needs some of this information to report to the federal government by the end of September on how much state fund program expenses we had in 1819. And so they report that in September, or actually October 1st, and then they give a final in December, and that's why we have the certify it in December, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Another reason why we have the estimates due at September 1st is it allows the legislature, as they're looking at the budget for 2021, to get a chance to preview some of this data to see if they're going to decide to do some kind of new funding model or look at average daily attendance based on some kind of hours. It gives them an idea of what these estimates look like, because the budget process, usually September, October, they start looking at different ideas. By November, they have to come up with what they're going to put into the governor's budget, and by December it's finalized, and then it comes out at the beginning of January. So this would help as well as that, because December would be too late for this process. So let me just show you the next slide. So if you're doing the estimate, so just going back, so September 1st, estimated amount, you would go to the screen, and Veronica will show us. It says it's right below the, once you put your program areas in or your leverage funds, it'll go preview. And so when you go preview and submittal, you'll go save estimates. And that's what's due September 1st. Not submit actuals, but save estimates. So it allows you to save the estimates, and then December 1st, you'll certify that amount, those same amounts, or you could update them. But then you'll click on, if you're looking at the screen, click on Submit Actuals. And that's when that gets submitted. So hopefully that's clear, pretty simple. Let's see if we have any questions. I'll pause there. Question on instructional hours. This is from Jeff. Is this total student hours of instruction by attendance or total hours of instruction available to the students. So we'll get into the definition of hours, contact hours, but I'm trying to see total hours of instruction by attendance available to the students. So Jeff, I'm not really sure. I'm thinking it's what's in your attendance system, but I'll get back to you on that. And here's someone with no audio. I think they're working on it. Yes. How are community college pulling hours of instruction? We'll cover that in just a few slides. The leverage funds are for 1819, correct, Lori? And then what if someone submits by accident? So you can always go in and update your estimates because it's saved. It's when you're certified that you have to go back and cancel. But we can, Veronica can show you how to do that in a little bit. And Shelley says, if we have our actuals already, can we submit actuals now? I believe so. Yeah, if you click on the right button, you can submit the actuals and be done with the exercise. Burr says, for hours, is that TE state report program hours? So it's whatever you think is the most accurate accounting of hours. I don't think the TE state report of program hours will be ready until maybe like November, but there are reports in TE that show the hours, and so CASAS is going through that right now and providing the data review. But if they come from your attendance system, you can use that. If they come from CASAS and you're comfortable with those hours in TE, you can use that. Cindy says, will ABE be clustered with ESL in the future like WIOA, or will it continue to be paired with ASE? So we'll look at that in just a little bit. Petaluma says there were some special instructions on how to calculate hours last year. Have those been sent? Yeah, we're going to cover that in a little bit. I have that on another slide. And Beth says, will we be shown how to run those reports in TE during this webinar? So no, that's something I would follow up with CASAS on. I would contact them to see, how you would pull that data. I don't believe those reports are going to be ready, but you have your hours that you reported from 1819 in CASAS, and so they should be able to show you how to get those hours out if you don't want to use your attendance system. And then Nancy says, how does adult ed collect hours of instruction? We'll get into that in a little bit. We'll be given a tool to guide folks on calculating in-kind. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And so Luke says they're not. Yeah. So with CASAS, so that data just came in, and so you're going to use what you've put into CASAS, what the existing data is. You can get that data out. If you're having trouble or don't know how to get that data out, I would contact CASAS. If you're someone that's worked with TOPS Pro a lot, you can probably get those hours out, or you can use your attendance system, whichever is easier. And then Kelly, I'll talk about how to get this information out of MIS. Okay, so here are some of the changes that you're going to see. We're going to clarify program area clarification. We're going to define instructional and contact hours. We're going to tell you how to report integrated course hours. We're going to talk about how we're not reporting service hours. We're going to talk about which fund sources for reporting expenses we're going to use this year. We're going to cut back a few. And then somebody had this question. We're going to align with WIOA on how we define fees / program income and in-kind contributions. Okay, so let's get into this. So we're still reporting by the 7 program areas. Last year we had a problem as we were duplicating hours between CTE and workforce reentry. So we fixed that problem. We're now calling workforce reentry workforce prep. It might still show as workforce reentry in NOVA, which is fine, but we're not using workforce entry to collect barriers to employment or student characteristics. So what that was doing is that was double counting the CTE and the workforce reentry. Now they're just separate programs. So if you feel comfortable with just reporting hours under CTE, you can. If you feel comfortable breaking it out between pre-apprenticeship, workforce reentry, and short-term vocational, you can. So either way, we can roll up those three CTE programs into one, or you can report them out separately. It works either way. What we don't want you to do is use workforce reentry to collect barriers to employment, which was causing the double count in our duplication of hours. So hopefully that's clear. So Elias says running reports in TE, state reports, California. Okay, so that's showing you where the reports are in TE. And I don't think we have anybody on CASAS today, but it shouldn't be that much of a problem to locate those reports. And CASAS is very responsive on their technical assistance. Okay, here's another change. Well, actually a clarification. What is the definition of an instructional hour? And so we're using the federal guidelines. And here's what that definition is. So the definition, what they call contact hours, what we are calling instructional hours, are hours of instruction or instructional activity that the participant receives from the program. Instructional activity includes any program-sponsored activity designed to promote learning in the program curriculum, such as classroom instruction, assessment, tutoring, or participation in a learning lab. Time spent on assessment can be counted only if the assessment is designed to inform placement decisions, assess progress, or inform instruction. Time used simply to administer tests such as GED or HiSET cannot be counted as instructional activity. So we had a lot of questions come up in our regional training, the last one in North Orange and one in Mount Diablo. And someone was saying, well, what about assessment? And the way Jay phrased this is, if it's tied to enrollment in the classroom, you can count that. If it's just a general assessment and it's not tied to the classroom placement, then it's not really part of that hours of instruction. So it has to be really linked to placing that student into the classroom and how you set it up. If you just do a general assessment, then you can't really track that as contact hours. So let me see, so back to Jeff's question. So we want to track those actual hours in the classroom, what shows up into TOPSPRO using this definition. And if you still have questions about that or I'm not explaining it correctly, I would just contact Jay at CASAS and have him clarify that as far as what you're looking at in the TE and what hours are being reported. I would assume it's the hours that are showing up in TE, and so those would be what you've reported. Let's see if we have any questions here. So Luke says 55 and over adults in CTE need to be pulled out. So we're not collecting it like we did last year, Luke. And so we'll collect that in the basic demographics. And so what we're encouraging people to do at intake is collect all those like age, barriers, characteristics, demographics. We're not going to use kind of like workforce reentry like we used the prior year. And so that was confusing and it resulted in a duplicate count. And so hopefully that's clearer and simpler just to do it at intake. And we get that data pulled out when we ask for someone's age. We can say, oh, okay, we have X number of students over 55. We don't need a special category for that like we did last year. So Beth likes the definition of contact hours. High school equivalency practice tests are diagnostic and seems to be part of instruction. Yes, so if you're doing it as prep and not as test, if it's part of the classroom instruction, I would say that's fine. So Sandy says, what if a student is only in a class that we have marked as workforce prep? We don't assign barriers to that student, or do we just assign all classes to short-term CTE instead to avoid the problem? So if it is going to be problematic for you to break it out, You could just report it all under CTE for this exercise. That's not going to kill us, because what the state is looking at for the expenses, they're looking at basically ABE, ASE, ESL to tell the feds we're not supplanting the federal funds. And so because the pre-apprenticeship and workforce reentry is such a small program compared to just the short-term vocational, it's fine rolling them up. It's fine if you want to break them out, whatever's easy for you, Sandy. And so I'll leave it at that, and you can make that decision. So let's see. So for community colleges, so this is for Jill and Alicia. So the way the college hours get reported is through non-credit, and there's a 320 report. But I think you could pull it out of your attendance system as well. And some of the bigger non-credit programs have already figured this out. And so I don't know if any of them are on the line. But there's a couple of ways you can do it in the community college system. You can use your attendance software to pull out the CAPE, program areas, or you can rely on the 320 report. But the only problem with the 320 report, it has lump sum non-credit. It doesn't break out the program areas. So you'd still probably have to go back to your attendance system or develop some methodology to say, okay, I have all these non-credit hours. How is that attributed to the program areas? So if you're WIOA 2 college, you might have this data already in TOPS Pro that you could pull out. If you're not WIOA 2, you might have to go back to your attendance system, or you could try using the 320 report and use some kind of prorated percentages of where you're seeing attendance in the different programs. So we don't want you to spend too much time and effort, and so you can get those estimates. The problem with the college data, if you're not doing a recalc, that's not going to change too much when you come to December to certify the actuals, but it'll give you more time to kind of look at the data and maybe talk with researchers and your data people to see what kind of percentages are in non-credit so you could break out those hours. So feel free to prorate, use estimates. I know it's not going to be easy on the college side unless you're kind of WIOA 2, but even with the non-WIOA programs, you're still going to have to find out that data. So Alicia says, is the 320 report in MIS? So the 320 report is a report that the colleges submit to the Chancellor's office. It's an attendance report that they use to create full-time equivalent, so FTES. And so one thing I forgot, so in that 320 report, you'll have FTES, so you have to break down that FTES. If you go to the letter, we have instructions on, dividing it by 500, I think in 25 hours, or multiplying it, that'll get you the total hours. So you have to do a couple of steps in deciphering that 320 report. And so if that's not going to be helpful, you might want to go back to your attendance system. Okay, and Maria says, how does Adult Ed pull total hours of instruction by program using ASAP? And so that's something, I'm not an ASAP person, but I'm sure you could talk to you could either talk to some of your local K-12s that have ASAP, or you could contact ASAP. Depends on how you set it up. There's a lot of adult schools that use ASAP, and so that's what I would recommend. So Kern Community College has some advice for Jill and Alicia. We worked with our colleges to come up with a formula to figure out a formula to calculate most accurately for our non-credit hours per program, for our programs in ESL that have credit and non-credit. So Kern is doing exactly what we want them to do, coming up with some kind of formula, prorating it, trying to figure out, because it is difficult in the college system if you're not a WIOA 2 grantee to break out those hours. So I think the 320, so the college hours are available as of, I think, July 1. And so if you do a recalc, then the recalc's not available until something like November. But I don't think many districts, you would have to ask your district if they're doing a recalc. Otherwise, that data should be available, but Corley, you would still have to do some kind of formula to break that out. So although the 320 has the FTES, you're going to have to get that FTES and break it out into hours by multiplying it by the 525 and then break that out by program area. So there are a few steps, and hopefully your researcher and your data people can help you with that. So Jay Noel says, is the reporting period for colleges based on terms? And so, yeah, so that would be that, well, actually, so that report would be for last year, I believe. I'm not too familiar when the 320 report comes out. I think it's for the year, but don't quote me on that. So Annabelle, remember that CAPE is non-credit adult education. So that's why Kern broke out their credit and non-credit. So they weren't reporting credit ESL. They had to break out because of the coding. Sometimes the ESL gets coded, for both not credit and non-credit. Depends on how your CB21 levels are, how you're coding things. So that could vary from college to college. But for this exercise, it's really for colleges. It's only non-credit we're reporting on. There shouldn't be any credit hours or credit expenses. Thank you, Kern, for the follow-up. And let's see. So Jill, you'd have, if they're mirrored ESL, yeah, you'd have to figure out a way to break that out. Okay. So Kern's going to follow up. Thank you, Kern. And I'm going to move on to the next slide. So for people that are running integrated courses, for TE, COSTAS has recommended if a class is identified as integrated, the hours will be divided equally between programs designated for that record. If they aren't integrated and it's like a 70-30 split or something, in TOPS Pro you can create two classes, one for each instructional program, and this is kind of the stuff that Jay goes over in the regional training. So if you do have follow-up questions on that, you can contact COSTAS directly on how that would work, along the lines of, also of generating those reports. For colleges, we haven't figured this out yet. So if you do have integrated courses, you're going to have to come up with that formula like Kern did, because we don't have a way of coding those classes if they're integrated. So unfortunately, we don't have a solution on that one. Let's see. So Maria, the 320 report is the attendance report that goes to the Chancellor's office to show how many FTES you're generating for that college, and that's for non-credit. And I think it's for credit as well, but there's a non-credit report and then there's a credit report. And so you can check with your accounting office at your district, or you can go on the Chancellor's Office website, because they have that information as well on that. So another change is we're not reporting service hours. It was too confusing. It caused too many problems. And so we're not going to be tracking service hours. We will be only tracking instructional hours for NOVA program area reporting. And so that should be helpful in your attendance systems, because I think in TE it separates out instructional hours from services, and I think in MIS you can only report instructional hours. I mean, you can try through SSSP reporting services, but I don't think there was a way to track service hours. But nonetheless, we're not going to be using service hours for this exercise. Okay, so getting into expenditures, the second part of this exercise. When CLASP did the review, as some of you were interviewed by CLASP on how to kind of streamline this process, among the changes that we're kind of going through, one of the changes were we asked for a lot of different fund sources. And so we went back to the legislation, And the legislation really calls for 6 fund sources along with CAPE to be shared between members. So if you go back to the education code, it says each member must share WIOA 2, non-credit apportionment, CalWORKs, Perkins, local control formula funding, and the K-12 adult jail education funds. And so those are the 6 plus the CAPE funds that you'll see on the NOVA screen for expenditures. We're also including fees and in-kind, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so those are the areas that we, at a minimum, we want you to cover. Now these other ones in the second bullet are optional. So if you do want to report contractual services or community college supportive services or WIOA 1, ITAs, or other grants you're getting from the feds or other state grants or strong workforce, you can do that, but it's not required. It was a heavy lift for a lot of districts, and so we're just going to go back and align with the legislation. And at a minimum, you only have to report your CAPE funds, your WIOA 2 funds, if you're college, non-credit apportionment, CalWORKs, Perkins, if you're K-12 or county office, your LCFF, and if you're K-12 or county office, your jail ed funds for adults. You'll also have to report on fees, but we're using the WIOA definition for fees, and in-kind, we're using the WIOA definition, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I'm going to pause there for a second to see if there's any questions about these changes. So do we report hours in correctional facility if our jail program is not part of the CAPE program funding? So if you're a K-12 jail education program, that's what's referenced in the legislation. If you're a K-12 or a college that has a contract with the jail or a contract with a county correctional facility or even a state correctional facility, that's not that fund source they're referencing. And so if you wanted to, you could report that under other state grants. If it doesn't match the K-12 jail ed funds that are specifically called out and dispersed by CDE. Otherwise, you don't have to report those if you don't want to. It's up to you. So Sean says, what would be the advantage to report the optional funds? So the optional funds, some consortia use this exercise as a way to share information, to show what each other's doing, to show what fund sources are coming in. And so some will continue reporting the optional fund sources as a way for locals to understand and look into NOVA and see what they're doing, and they do that on a regional basis. And so that would be the prime option, or the primary option that I'm seeing to continue reporting those optional funds. And Kern was saying, and Veronica will show this, CAPE and in-kind have to be added, and we'll show you how to add those funds in NOVA. They don't show up automatically. Okay, so Avon says, yes, we are a K-12 program with the MOU with the jail. Okay, great. So Jill says, yes, okay, Kern. CalWORKs funds. So this is from Jose. Our school was awarded funds which were not received during 1819. Do we report these funds? Only if they were expensed. So you're only reporting funds that were expensed. If you never got these funds, you wouldn't report them. So let's say your Perkins funds are late, or your CalWORKs funds are late, or non-credit apportionment came in, but it was in a non-CAPE program area, like it all went to health and safety or parent, not necessarily like maybe home ec. You wouldn't report that apportionment. You would report the ones that are pertinent to CAPE. Let's see what else. CAPE and WIOA funds pay our adult ed instructors. How would I report only instructional hours paid by CAPE? So Nancy, in the exercise for hours, you're reporting the student hours, And then in the leverage funds exercise, you're just reporting expenses, total expenses by fund source. So you don't have to break it out by instructional uh, instructors or classified or anything like that. You just report that lump sum that was expensed by CAPE funds or the lump sum that was expensed by WIO2. So you don't have to break out the expenses by category, just by fund source. So hopefully that made sense, or maybe it didn't. Okay, great. Okay, so here is important where people were very confused, and we were confused in how we were defining in kind. And so we decided to use something that most people are familiar with, is the WIOA, or the federal definitions of in kind, and the federal definition of what they call program income, which is the same as fees. And so we're using that because when you're reporting your WIOA 2 financials, you're going to use those same definitions, and you could report that same information. And so here's how we define it in the letter. I'm not going to go into this, but this is right out of the federal regs. This is the in-kind definition. We have this in the letter that's posted on the website that went out last week. And then here's the program income definition. And so this is the same as you would do for WIOA 2. If you're non-WIOA 2, this would be the same you'd use for other federal funds like Perkins or WIOA 1, or if you have some kind of other federal grant. So we're trying to make it easy to use the same information, the same funds expenditures, so you don't have to be doing this 2 or 3 times differently. Okay, I'm going to go back to the other page. So in kind. So you can just go to the CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, I think, to CFR 300-306. That's the Uniform Administrative Requirements that pretty much everyone has to do that gets federal funds. And so we're using these definitions. And then Linda, if you want to, you can download in the left-hand corner of the page. If you like these definitions or want to keep these slides, just click on at the bottom left-hand corner where it says Program Area Reporting, and you can save that to your own computer, and you can reference this at any time. And I think everybody got the slides in advance as well. Okay, so just summarizing. So we went through all the changes. We realized that we're telling you about these changes after the end of the 18-19 program year. And so some of you have already set up your reporting based on how we did it last year. And so if your member is still using the old guidance from last year, that's okay. We hope that they don't double count their CTE data with workforce reentry, but you won't be penalized or have your data or fiscal submission rejected. We understand that some people set this stuff up well in advance. We hope that the changes will reduce the amount of work that each member is required to do, and that if you're going to use the old guidance, just get caught up for next year. And so that'll be it'll be the regular process estimates in September and actuals in December. So I think before we open up the NOVA with Veronica, I'm going to see if we have any questions. And Veronica will show us how to add the CAPE program and add in kind. And I think I don't know if there were any other questions that we missed. But I think we're going to have plenty of time to go back and answer some questions. So with that, I'll continue to answer questions in the chat while Veronica takes us on the NOVA kind of walkabout tutorial. Go ahead, Veronica.
All right, thank you, Neil. So before we get started, I will share my screen, but first I wanted to check to make sure everyone's able to hear me. Yes? Okay, great. So I will begin sharing my screen. Thank you all for letting me know that you can hear me. Okay, so I am now at the NOVA homepage, so I will enter in my information and my password to log on to NOVA. And if you ever need to reset it, you can use the reset feature, or if someone's new to your consortium and they need login information, please contact TAP and we'll show you exactly how to get them signed on with NOVA. So on the home page, I am now at the program area dashboard. So on the left-hand side in the blue taskbar, I have selected CAEP here. So I've gone here and selected the CAEP program, and then I've selected the program area reporting since that's what we are talking about at this time. Now that I'm at the program area reporting dashboard, I will select the consortium in which I will be showing you this demonstration. So for today, we're going to work with Citrus College Adult Education Consortium. And so I selected my consortia. Now I'm going to go over to my program year. As you can see, there are multiple program years. So just like Neil noted in the presentation, you want to make sure that you are reporting for the 2018-19 program year. So make sure that this is selected. And I've learned from experience, if you were to come out of this or make any changes, let's say you just simply hit the back button, if you end up on the program area reporting dashboard, it will divert back to the most recent year, which is the 2019-20 year. So just make sure that you have the 2018-19 year selected. I made that mistake, so I just want to make sure that everyone else does not make the same mistake that I made. So I'm going to select the consortium since they are in the process of submitting their program area hours and expenditures. So just double checking, I have my 2018-19 program year selected. No one has certified this report as of right now. Here I do want to highlight the certifying authorities. So when you do come to that December 1st certification date, these are the only two people who are able to certify this report in NOVA. So make sure, although other parties can enter in the information, these are the only two people who are able to certify that this information is correct and an accurate representation of the consortium. So now I'm going to go down to the active member agencies. So here are all of the member agencies who are a part of the Citrus College Adult Education Consortium. And here you can see that Citrus CCD is an optional member. And what this means is that Citrus CCD does not receive any CAEP funding through the consortium. However, they are an optional entity to enter this information. So what that means is if they decide that they do not want to report their hours or expenditures, then the report can still be certified without their information. So the consortium could still be certified if they choose not to report their hours and expenditures. So I just wanted to point that out for everyone.
Veronica,
So I'm going to,
just a quick question. So, are you seeing a little black box on the lower right-hand corner about halfway down? Are you seeing
give
that
me
under? Oh, there it is. It went away.
there.
Okay,
Okay, great.
you're
Okay,
good.
I fixed it on my end. All right, great. Thank you for that. Okay, so now we're back to the active member agencies. So I'm going to click on Azusa Unified. So I'm going to click on this member agency to begin inputting the program hours. That's the first step in the process. So here you can see that the instruction is to enter hours of instruction totals for year broken up by each program area. And you want to make sure that you enter whole numbers only or whole hours only. Partial hours will be rounded up. So for example, if I have, let's say 50.5 hours or 50 and a half hours for ABASC and I try to enter in 50.5, the system will not allow me to do that. They will round up the numbers to the next whole number. So make sure you see how it went up to 51. So just make sure that you are entering, if you do enter in increments, it will round it up or down depending on the increment that you enter. So you're able to enter in hours for each of the 7 program areas that Neil stated. And you can either enter in using the keypad, or if you want to enter in using the up and down feature, you're able to do that as well. So you enter in hours for all of these, and as you can see that the system calculates your total hours. So you don't have to worry about doing any math here. Just make sure you enter in accurate numbers and the system will take care of the calculation for you. So now that I've entered in my hours, my program hours, so my hours of instructions for Q1 through Q4 of the 2018-19 program year, I'm able to go to my leverage funds by selecting leverage funds here, or if I go back to program hour, my next feature is now enabled, so I can just simply hit next and then I can go in to enter this information. So you will enter in expense totals for each fund broken up by program area. And here as well, you will enter in whole numbers. So we will not take any cents. The system will round up to the next whole number if you were to enter in cents here as well. So here are all of the fund areas. And it came up that CAEP and in-kind fees are not a part of this list. So in order to add CAEP, or the California Adult Education Program, and in-kind fees, because those are two expenditures or fund sources, excuse me, that you have to submit. So if you just select the drop down box and you select California Adult Education Program, and then you select add selected fund, that will add the CAP fund line item to the fund sources, and then you can enter in your information as you move along. And as I'm entering in the information, the system is calculating my numbers for me at the bottom where it says totals. So all you have to do is just enter in all of your numbers. And now I'm going to grab in-kind contributions and add that field to the total expenditures. And same thing, just enter in the dollar amounts and the system will calculate everything. So it's going to calculate it at the bottom. So across all program areas. So here are all of your program areas, and then if you go down, then those are all of the expenditures for that particular program area. And if you scroll all the way over to the right hand side of the screen, you're going to see that it's calculated by fund source. The totals are calculated by fund source, and then at the bottom you'll have your grand total for all of the fund sources that you have entered. And in addition to the CAP and in-kind contributions, there are also WIO1, donations, strong workforce, community college support services, and if the fund sources that attribute to your program is not listed here, you are able to add other federal grants and other state grants. And if you add this fund source, it's not going to ask you for the name of the fund source, but you're still able to enter in all of the expenditures that you receive or that you've had for this particular fund source. And then once you've entered in all of your information and you've checked that everything is accurate and you are ready to go on to your preview screen, you are able to hit next to go on to the preview screen. And up top, it's going to talk about who the member representatives are. So here we just have one member representative, and keep in mind on that December 1st deadline, the member representative is the only person who's able to submit this report, and then the certifying authority are the only people who are able to certify the reports. So you may have someone who's labeled as a contact for your consortium for this particular agency, so they are able to enter in the information. However, they are not able to submit. The member representative has to submit, and the certifying authority have to certify at the December 1st deadline. So once you verify that all of your information is correct, and as you can see for adults with disabilities and K-12 success, so on and so forth, I did not enter any information, and that was intentional. So you don't have to have an amount for each of the program areas, and the system will allow you to still submit. Same here, I didn't have any funding from the anything above the CAEP program, so nothing's entered. However, I do have expenditures for funding from CAEP and in-kind contributions those numbers are entered at the bottom, and then I'm able to, at this point, save my estimates since we're at the saving estimates part for the September 1st deadline. And then once the December 1st or before the December 1st deadline, you want to come back in to make sure that you are submitting actual. So if any of your numbers change, I think that was a question that came up. So I'm going to show you another consortia. Well, actually, I can just save these estimates and then we'll back them out later. So it's letting you know that the message says that these 2018-19 program area and leverage fund values will be saved as estimates, and that's what we want to do now. And then it says you will need to return to submit your actuals later. And so we will simply press save here. Now, let's say theoretically I did press save here. If I come back in and I want to go back and alter any of my totals, so I'm going to pull up another consortia who I know have submitted their information. So I'm going to go to Barstow and scroll down. Oh, they were saved. So let me find another one. Let me just go back to Citrus. Okay, so they are still in draft status because I haven't saved anything. And now they're diverted back to not started because I didn't save anything. But let's say, hypothetically speaking, I did press save. Let me just enter in one number. And then I go to next. And then here's my preview screen. One number here. Okay, now my save estimates is back. And then I'm going to press save here. And so now, as you can see, my status has changed to estimates saved, so that the system has captured everything that I have saved. Now let's say now you're getting back to, you want to make changes to your estimates before September 1st, or it's after September 1st and you would like to submit your actuals. All you would have to do is go back into the first area, the program area reporting, and I can simply change the numbers. So unlike the work budgets and work plans, as well as the expenditure reporting, you have to unsubmit and uncertified and unsubmit. Here you do not have to do that since we just saved everything. So you are able to just go back in freely and submit your changes. Same here if I want to take this and turn it back to 0. And now that everything is back to 0, it's going to go back to draft status. So you don't have to do any uncertifying or unsubmitting of anything. You can just go ahead and simply make the changes that you would like to make. And I believe that those were all of the steps that I wanted to show. Go ahead, Neil.
Oh, just someone noted that you clicked into the 1920 reporting tab.
Thank you. Okay, yes. And that's, see, I told you that's easy to forget. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. It's very easy to go back out, and then when you come back in, it diverts to the current year. Okay, Neil, were there any other questions before I come out of NOVA?
I don't think there were any. Well, let's see if we have any questions. Let's see. So the ones I haven't answered, there's one from Jen, but it's not NOVA related. We have correctional funds from state ADA, and we have local funds from the county. You want me to put the ADA funds on which line? The ISD funds on which line? So if you get K-12 adult education funds from CDE, that's what goes on the jail. How do they label it in, Veronica, how do they label this in, it is labeled K-12, I think you just scroll up just a little bit. K-12 adult ed jail funds. So those come from CDE. There's only like about 12 districts in the state that get those. So otherwise you wouldn't be reporting those, or if you want to, Jen, you can report those as other state funds, and Veronica can show you if you wanted to add other state funds to your box. You don't have to report this, but maybe your consortia wants to see that. I think there's other state funds. So Eileen says, oh, okay, she already took care of that. So Francisca says, could you go back to the page that shows where you enter expenses? Okay, and then Francisca, we are reporting CAPE funds because that's your major source of funding. And so that's what's running the program. So there's $538 million of CAPE funds. There's probably like 50 million of CalWorks, 90 million of non-credit. Well, I don't know, maybe 40 million of Perkins. So we do want to enter the CAPE funds because that is our main fund source. Okay. All right, and Sherry says, will a member be able to unsubmit their actuals in the event they need to change something after they have officially submitted? So Veronica, after they've submitted, how do you cancel? Is there a way to do that?
Yes, it's the same process that we use for the budget and work plan as well as the expenditure reports. It would be simply the member representative, once it's certified, the primary contact will have to go in and uncertify the report, and then the member representative will go in and unsubmit the actuals. And then once they unsubmit, they'll be able to update the report and then resubmit. The consortium lead or the primary contact will then need to recertify.
Okay, and then Shauna had a question. If CAPE is a major fund source, why isn't it auto-field? Well, good question. It was last year, but somehow it fell off, and we've asked our programmers to fix it, but they haven't fixed it yet, and so this is the workaround. And so if they do fix it, then you don't have to do this, but if it isn't fixed in time, then you will have to add it. So sorry about that. And then MJC says, reporting for CC community colleges are only for non-credit courses. Yes? Yeah, that's correct. So I didn't understand why she added the category when all of this is CAPE funds. So technically, WIOA 2 is different. It's not CAPE funds. Veronica, if you want to go up. So if you break, like I said, if you break down these fund sources, so like we owe $90 million comes out from the state from the feds. That's not CAPE funds. CAPE funds are $538 million. K-12 jail ed funds are about, I don't know, $12 million or so, maybe a little higher. That comes out from CDE. LCFF comes out from CDE. Perkins comes out from community college and CDE. So these are all separate fund sources. They're not all, they're all funds we use for the California Adult Education Program, but they're not all CAPE funds. So CAPE funds are separately, when you tally all this up, it's about $881 million we're leveraging. A big portion of that, 538 are CAPE. But there's under 300 million or so, 350 million that are from these other fund sources. So don't confuse the program with the fund source. That's just my advice. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, yes, I understand my community is why we were adding key. Sorry, okay. Yeah, we have to add it because the programming. Okay, so I think we'll move on to the FAQs, and we only have a couple of minutes. So Veronica's going to stop sharing her screen, and we'll go back to the slides. And okay, so we went into Nova. We got a little dirty, got some oil on our hands. So now we're going to look at frequently asked questions, and I'll try to run through these quickly. This will be extremely difficult to separate some of my funds expenses as I receive a grant that combines several programs. So our answer is we expect, and I don't know why the C's keep falling out, but we expect CAPE members to enter into NOVA their best estimates given the information data from their local and state level systems. The CAPE office encourages CAPE members to prorate when necessary when funding sources or programs overlap or too difficult to separate. You can also use your attendance system or TopsPro to calculate a percentage model that could assist in separating funds. So we're encouraging you to prorate and estimate and flexibility. Here's a question on the 320 report. My College 320 report includes non-credit programs that are not one of the CAPE program areas. I don't know how to separate it out. And then back to your attendance system. Feel free to use your attendance system and or the TOPS Pro system if you're WIOA 2 college that collects program service and instructional hours to prorate the amount that you think reflects the hours for that program area. Let's see. Question, I am at an adult school or the adult school. Should we use ASAP reporting or TE to complete instructional hours in NOVA? So our answer is the district has several options. We suggest that the district compare the two reports and enter the most accurate information into NOVA. And remember, these are estimates for September 1st. What are the differences between short-term CTE, workforce reentry, and pre-apprenticeship? So we do have the legislation that lists those. If you're unable to break out workforce reentry, pre-apprenticeship, or short-term CTE, you may report them all under CTE. We covered this earlier. So we're trying to do away with that workforce reentry double count. We're actually calling it workforce prep, and you can roll them all up as CTE programs, or you can separate them out as individual programs. I went into NOVA and accessed the program area report, but it shows it was already submitted. How can that be? It appears you may have selected 17-18 as the program year. The program area reporting for 17-18 was submitted last program year. Please remember to select 18-19 year from the drop-down menu. And here we go. If you have other questions, and I'm going to read Ed's post. He says, shout out to TAP. And FYI, we ran our program hour report and found a substantial decrease in hours when compared to 17-18. I sent the request to TAP, and with hours, I had an answer. If you want to dive deeper into your report or run an expanded format report as selected in TE setup window, once we ran the expanded report, we found an internal procedure error, and we will fix for 1920. Thank you, TAP and Jay Wright. So feel free, like Ed was saying, use TAP, connect with CASAS, ask some questions. It could show some reporting issues that you might have or things you weren't thinking about. So Lionel says, as I understand it, we need to distribute CAPE funds used for admin facilities across program areas. Should we use hours or expenditures for the distribution? So Lionel, I would just use for program areas, you could use like a percentage based on enrollment. I don't think you have to get down to the nitty-gritty. I would use some kind of allocation methodology that seems fair. And if attendance percentages by program is what you can use that distributes those expenditures appropriately for things like overhead and custodial and facilities and admin, etc., then go for it. You might want to check with accounting of what they think is an appropriate methodology. But I think that would be important to use whatever's gets you closest to accurate numbers. And thank you, Veronica, for posting where the webinar recording will be. And I think we're good. We're at 1:03. I apologize for going over. If you do have additional follow-up questions, you can contact TAP. If you had a question for Kern, I think Annabelle has a question to get the Kern email. TAP can facilitate that connection. So if you want to find out more information about how a local consortia did something, TAP can facilitate that connection. Veronica, anything else to add as we wrap up?
No, definitely we will follow up with our current colleague to disseminate that information to everyone who was interested. And in addition, we have been talking about the upcoming summit. So if you have not registered, please be sure to do so. We are aligning a lot of great presentations, and a lot of them are from our local practitioners. So we definitely want to make sure that you are in attendance and that you are able to receive as much valuable information as possible, especially as consortia implement their 3-year plan. So if you haven't done so, please be sure to check with your consortium lead, receive a pin, and register register for the summit. It's going to be a great event. In addition to that, we do have more upcoming webinars. If you haven't registered for Jay and Neil's Data and Accountability workshop, there are several more upcoming workshops, so please be sure to register for those. And you can do so by going to the following URL and registering. And be on the lookout for upcoming information. So now I will close the webinar, and when I do, the evaluation will appear. Please be sure to fill it out and let Neil and I know what you thought about today's webinar and if there's more information that you are in need of, and we'll make sure that we are able to respond to you and provide that information. Thank you all so much.
Oh, Veronica, one last thing. I'm sorry. So one last plug. So Jay and I will be in Fresno on September 11th, and we'll be in Burbank on September 25th. So we talk about the same stuff at those webinars, and Jay can help you with those TE. I know the estimates are due September 1st, but this can help towards getting those actuals entered by December 1st. So Fresno, Veronica gave you the link, and Burbank as well next month, and then October we have another 4 regional events that you can follow up on as well. So thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Marjorie, for background technical assistance, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you all, and have a great afternoon.